Well, welcome back, everybody. We are here at Sawyer Paddles and Oars Live once again. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Southern Oregon. And today we are continuing on talking a little bit about what we're all dealing with is, a lot of folks that we provide paddles and oars to are outfitters, and our outfitter brothers and sisters are definitely wheeling some difficult times trying to modify their operations and make it so they can operate in this 2020 season, which will always be known as the infamous 2020 season. And today I'm joined by Aaron from IOGA, and I'm going to throw it over to him to let him introduce himself and kind of what IOGA does, and then we'll just tackle a few topics and hopefully give you some information. Once again, this is live. We do have folks monitoring this, so if you have any questions during this time, just fire them off, and we will do our best to get to those as we go through here. So give us a little intro there, Aaron.
All right. Hey, thanks, Zach. Good to be here. Folks, hey, my name is Aaron. I'm the executive director of the Idaho Outfitters and Guides Association. We're a 501c6. Yep, that's the one, right? 503? Nope. Yep, we're a C6. Nonprofit trade association representing outfitters and guides across the state of Idaho. So everything from raft, fish, hunt, trail rides, ATV, UTV tours, ski touring, backcountry skiing, mountain climbing, everything you can possibly imagine. Having said that, over 65% of our membership and of outfitters and guides in Idaho are river-based. So there's certainly a strong connection to the river community and to outstanding companies like Sawyer. It's pretty rare when you see non-Sawyer oars out in Idaho. So really happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. So, really, we have a lot of outfitters all over the country that are kind of wrestling with this, and it kind of varies state by state. And we work closely with some of our outfitters here in Southern Oregon. And so one of the reasons that I reached out to you would be because you guys kind of have that full representation of Idaho. We have a lot of outfitters that actually work in Oregon and Idaho, just kind of sharing a couple of the rivers. But, and I know that they have like specific programs going on in Montana. We've talked with those folks a bit, and in Montana, not as much whitewater, but a lot of fishing where it's a lot of independent contractors and that kind of thing. And so, as we dive into this, we do just want to kind of cover, really what are the main changes, the things that people are wrestling with, and what customers can expect, because obviously a lot of folks that are customers of ours are actually booking with outfitters and going on river trips, and then also are boaters themselves, and probably have that middle fork of the salmon marked on their calendar somewhere and hoping to get out there at some point. So we'll talk a little bit about that and just kind of some of the things that become really more of a heightened importance, like the screening, like the group size, like families that are traveling together and already are together. How do they incorporate into a trip? And then just really, dealing with transportation and all those kind of things. Mm-hmm. So to kind of start off, you said that like 65% of your members are river-based operations. Of that 65%, what's your mix as far as day trip folks versus multi-day folks?
Yeah, I think a lot of them are both. So I'd say, of that 65%, if I were to break it down again, I'd say probably 30% of that 65% do both. Gotcha. So probably about roughly half we could call day trip operators, but who are primarily multi-day outfitters. And primarily when we're talking about multi-day, it's main salmon, middle fork, lower salmon, Selway, like Jarbridge, Bruno, like some of those areas, Oahe,
right,
which ties over to Oregon.
Yeah. And so, as far as the challenges, they are a little different depending on if they're day tripping or multi-day.
Definitely, yep.
But let's pretty much dive in initially to kind of the screening and some of the programs that Idaho's trying to integrate as far as how that pre-trip bit is going on.
Yeah. So Idaho started off, I feel like there's Oregon and Idaho are standouts I think, within the guiding community, like really strong guiding communities, really strong connection. And it's not just on the industry side, but also with the private boating community. I think there's a really strong base of support and communication there. And so in Idaho, this conversation is now what, I'm losing track of time, but 3.5 months old.
Yeah,
Right
about in there.
And people were revving up from the very get go. And so there have been any number of changes in how outfitters been trying to figure out how they operate and how they take care of their guides, how they take care of their guests, how they operate responsibly within their communities. So one of the things that IOGA started doing pretty early on was to reach out to county commissioners, mayors, and just local community organizations, not least individual citizens, and say, hey, here's what we're thinking. What do you think about this? Like, does this work with you? So there's a community component, and then in terms of guests and sort of the screening, as you put it, or which is correct by the way, but with screening, that's been a changeable thing over time. So initially we didn't really have those protocols. So when these conversations started, there weren't set protocols. The CDC started coming out with things about what generally you could look for. Those things ended up changing quite a bit. So are we screening for temperatures? What temperature sets up a trigger? What we've really aligned around, I think, in Idaho, and there's no industry standard for this yet by any means. But I think
exactly. That's the problem. Is like really right.
It's a huge problem. Yeah, no, yeah. So I can spend all day on that one. It really is a huge problem. Right. There is no industry standard. So one of the things that outfitters are trying to figure out is like, how do we, like, the responsibility end and then the coverage end? Like, how do we make sure that we are doing the thing that is most effective or most endorsed? And we've gotten some good support from the state on that, much more so than the federal government, in terms of like how we can ground these protocols, like screening protocols, in sound science and in alignment with what the state is doing. So we've been working with like Department of Health and Welfare here in Idaho to help give input on their seasonal workers protocols, which is sort of like the employee end, and then also to dial in like what is most comprehensively acceptable as well as scientifically informed that outfitters could generally agree to in terms of screening clients. And so one of the things is you can't have a conversation with a client in Florida a week beforehand and say, hey, have you been coughing recently? You've been in China a lot? It's like ultimately you have to have that conversation at the time. And so one of those procedural questions that came up was like, how do we, so, okay, somebody comes from Florida, they didn't have a cough last week, they show up here, do I send them back home? Like, what do I actually do do And I think those sort of interpersonal questions have been the tougher part of that actually than the protocols. But those, most outfitters, well, not most outfitters, I'd be shocked if there weren't an outfitter in Idaho right now who hasn't even encoded or codified operational protocols for screening clients at this point.
Right. Yeah, and I, like I said, we do work closely with some local outfitters, and we work in partnership with a local outfitter to operate and do a demo on the water every week. And
great guy, by the way.
The whole thing with the fact that it's like, here's your general liability release, and then here's your COVID release.
Yeah.
And it's like, I read through the thing completely, and I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty hefty. And then you give it to somebody, and it's like, this is basically, you need to read through this because you're agreeing to all of this because this is basically it, and it's one of those things is where, you have to take people on their word that yes, they're like, I haven't had a temperature, I haven't had any of these symptoms, but okay, now you signed to that effect that, so it's actually kind of given the screening a little more validity because it's like, hey, we've had these conversations, we've talked to you about this, and now you've agreed to the activity and you've agreed to the conditions of the activity.
Yep, that's right.
But also with outfitters, it would be nice to have a data set that, what is common practice, right? Because there's probably every region kind of has their own.
God, it would be great, because that's the bar we're held to. But no, I'm actually glad you went the direction of a liability release because it brings up something pretty interesting, which is like, I think what the liability release brings to the surface is everyone is being asked to be their best selves right now. And outfitters, as per usual, are rising to that challenge because they're like, when you think about it, the outfitting business is the business of risk mitigation. fundamentally what we do is we
Right.
take
Oh yeah.
risky situations and we put people who are good in risky situations and we mitigate that risk so that people who otherwise couldn't do it can experience that thing. Right. But then we're
Right.
asking now, to your point, or to what you brought up there, we're asking other people to say, okay, like I agree, I am signing off here that I'm not going to hold you liable. And also, and maybe more importantly, at a certain level, that I am acknowledging that I can't hold other clients liable, that I
Right.
myself
Right.
am going to be responsible. And so it really is asking, like, the liability release in a way, like it is legal protection or an attempt at that for outfitters.
Right.
But it's really asking clients to examine themselves and say, like, can I agree to be responsible here? Like, can I
Right.
actually sign off on this and say that I'm above board?
Yeah. We're all being expected to have reasonable and prudent behavior throughout this
That's right.
entire 6-day journey.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
and then along with the whole screening aspect is like, like I was telling you how, we get a lot of the e-blast from various outfitters, and now really like the family unit becomes a much more important piece to your
Hmm.
whole group dynamic. So if they're a family of 6 and they're all traveling together and they live together before they're at the point, it's kind of like, okay, well, you family of 6 are now pretty much a unit. And, like you fill one raft, you stay together, and you're pretty much, you move along your entire
Yep.
outing that way.
Yep.
And I think where the tricky stuff comes from is not just the boating along the river and having maybe the guide is wearing active face covering, but the guests are all like they all know they have all been together, so they're kind of like they are their own little pod of already cross-pollinated each other, right? But then it's kind of like these multi-days you're in camp, you're basically, you're serving food, so it's like all of these kind of things where now, you have to actually operate as a restaurant and everything else. So it really kind of just builds on the whole process.
Yeah. Well, I think like I think when everything sort of broke out and in the initial conversations, I think I and a lot of outfitters thought, and I like, well, this act, like I came from that background. So like, I think I'm still a guide. I was thinking like, man, that's going to be tough in camp. And I was really focusing on that element. And as time has gone on, I think that's really diminished because
Uh-huh.
when you really start diving down into the day-to-day, like what does the operational protocol look like on a day-to-day broken down by where I am, like it's actually pretty easy to engage in social distancing, to wear proper protective equipment, to like limit the people who have exposure to food or who's touching what. It's actually pretty easy to do that once you get to camp. So like say like Johnny set up, like who's setting up Johnny, what are they wearing, like what is the sanitation protocol. I mean, in
Right.
a way we're just fitting that in as an additional line item in our Johnny talk. It's like
Yeah.
those things ended up, though I thought they'd be right to the top, they ended up being the pretty easy ones. I think the ones that are more complicated are kind of where you hit initially, which is like guest to guest, the things that
Right.
outfitters don't
Right.
control. But we're just relying on people to be responsible.
Yeah, and I mean, just kind of comparing that day trip mentality to the multi-day,
Mm,
you do have much greater control over that environment in the multi-day, right?
yep.
Because you have that pre-trip orientation. You can pretty much just line it all out like, hey, this is how it's going to operate. These are the
Mm,
things that are going to be different in your trip, but it's good. That's the same thing is going to happen every day for
yep.
the next 6 days. So,
Yep. Here's your
by
script.
halfway through the trip, they're pretty tuned into the fact that
Yeah.
they know exactly what to do and what the protocols are at camp and what they can and cannot do.
Yeah. No, I think, yeah, that's a good point. I think you're right. Like I think on multi days, you're much better able to isolate behavior and to like inform behavior. Whereas on single days, it does, it's a different kind of challenge and you're dealing with a lot more
Right.
throughput. So a lot of different people. Screening protocols can still be there, but you're dealing with a different subset. I will say like outfitters, and this isn't just Idaho specific, but outfitters have really, I think, gone above and beyond what I've seen from other industries and trying to get out ahead. I mean, I was talking to a
Right.
group of outfitters who were talking about these, oh God, I'm blanking even on the name, but like they're these $1,000 machines that you take, and it sprays out chemicals that's usually used for pesticides, but you can spray out like sanitizer all over like PFDs, or you can
Right.
just wash them in bleach or like in soap. But like outfitters
Right.
have really gone gangbusters on making sure that they have everything in place to be able to operate. So
Oh yeah. And I mean, I think as we talked a little bit, like, with the example out here on the Rogue is like outfitters just have that inherent just behaviorism amongst all of them that when they're pushed to the limit and it'd be like, okay, here's all this crisis we're just going to dump on you. Your choice. What do you want to do? And so it's
yeah,
like, that's when outfitters kind of go, okay, wait a minute. We're, as much as we're competitors, we're all in this together and we want to basically be able to operate. So let's
yeah,
all get together. Let's talk it out. It's like the fires on the road, I mean, it's like
yeah,
they get together and it's like, hey, how do we continue to operate? We just got
yep,
shut down, but within a few days they've got some sort of operating plan happening, and you're boating people down the creek. And so it's like,
yeah,
yeah, outfitters tend to put that behind them and actually join together and do come out with a operational plan that is really rooted on straight from this is what we need to do, and this is how we know it can take place.
yeah.
And it's not like somebody sitting in an office somewhere going, oh, here's your plan. you
Yeah.
know
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I usually do, and I think in different ways, like you mentioned, like the Rogue and fires. And I think that it certainly shows itself most when there's a crisis, but I think outfitters in general have really done a good job of recognizing that it's less like our industry, and really commerce largely is less about pieces of pies than bigger pies, and that we can
oh
like
yeah.
work more effectively and be safer, better together than we can otherwise. And they've certainly shown up to play in that way in this crisis. It's really inspiring.
Right. Yeah. And it's like one of those things is like in Oregon and in Montana and in Idaho, it's like we're seeing a lot from the outfitters themselves and the outfitter groups that are really, kind of pulling it together and putting together a protocol and making it happen. But like
Mm.
as I mentioned to you before, it's like, I'm waiting to see the tourism boards get on board with it. Like, it's like now this industry that, like Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, Colorado, this big tourism dollars
Mm-hmm.
for guiding and outfitting, right? And now the outfitters are figuring out a way to operate. Now it's like, I keep watching, Travel Oregon kind of like, where's that
Yeah,
little program that's, promoting whitewater, in Oregon? Where's that program promoting that, come visit Idaho kind of thing? And
totally.
I think right now, because those organizations are so large, that they're not able to act yet. Like I think they're still kind of waiting to see it all shake out, right? They're kind of waiting to see like, they're kind of like, well, should we be promoting travel to our state, or are we just going to
Yep.
kind of sit and see what happens, what
No,
just
I
happens to
think
drive over the borders?
I think you gave the best possible summary there. And I think, yeah, they are asking exactly that question. Oregon, I think, and I think we may have talked about this a bit, but like Oregon has a really robust travel tourism department.
Right.
Travel Oregon is just incredibly strong. Idaho's pretty strong too. I will say, like, we've run up against that in a number of ways so far. And you mentioned like the communities where these things happen, and this is relevant to people who aren't commercial boaters too, because if you like going to places like Gold Hill, if you like going to places like Merlin, if you like going to places like Reagan's, Chalice, Salmon, all across the
Right.
board, if you're river people, which means you like going to these places depend inordinately on outfitting and
Oh yeah.
outdoor recreation tourism, but outfitting primarily. Outfitting in Idaho accounts or contributed over $1 billion last year economically to the state. 80% of resident outfitters live in communities with an average population of 500 or fewer. Altogether, it's like a two-legged stool. You have forestry and you have outfitting. And if you just kick out one of those legs, what do you have left? And so promoting those things, it is a balance. Like, you know, the states are really just saying like, oh, like, come here maybe, like, if you're definitely safe, you know, but don't otherwise.
Right.
They're trying to
Feel
make,
comfortable with it.
yeah, they're
If you're
trying to
ready
find
to
this
go
really,
out,
this
then
really
try our
awkward middle,
state.
there's really awkward middle ground. And you can see that in all of their advertising campaigns. I'm kind of glad you brought that up. It's, you know, I think they're in a tough place too, but I've been,
Right.
and I know other states have been pushing them, and Oregon Outfitters have done a great job of this, but pushing the state to recognize the importance of recreation, manufacturing, these rural areas, and to give it its due. Yeah. If you have any solutions to that
and
one,
so
I know.
like we have,
So you guys are great at marketing. If you have any industry-wide solutions you want to share with us here, that'd be great.
I'm just constantly, trying to figure out what the right timing is to bend somebody's ear at Travel Oregon, and and I think you kind of hit on it, where it's like it's gonna have to be kind of something that you started at the community level, and so like then it's Jackson County taking it to Travel Oregon, or Josephine, Jackson County together taking it to Travel Oregon, and like Southern Oregon Visitors Bureau, like where they're representing the, I think like you kind of have to work your way up that, because regionally they're in a much different situation. Like, I mean, I don't know exactly how things open back up in Idaho, but in Oregon, we've been going through phases by county, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like the hot spot in Oregon is the Portland metro area, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like Jackson Josephine going into phase 1, and then Jackson Josephine going into phase 2. But then you have other parts of the state up in Portland. Finally, they're getting to phase 1, but then we just had a big spike this week, and it's kind of like everybody's like, what's that all about? All of a sudden Oregon's a hot spot where, you're having increase. And so, but there's still just this, everything's just kind of continuing to go on. And it's kind of like, it makes you feel like, I'm glad I put these protocols in place and I haven't released them. I'm still operating this way. And it's pretty much, I'm going to continue to operate this way no matter what phase we're in, because it's like everybody's still in that kind of that flux. But we do have kind of a, go ahead.
I was just going to say, on the community up approach, and I didn't even think about this beforehand, but I just shared it over. One of the other things we did, and this came from a couple of outfitters who are both Oregon and Idaho based. Eric Weiss at the Lawrence Torpedo is one of the key ones there. But we, as part of the outreach program from the get-go, we were reaching out to mayors, chambers of commerce, as I said earlier, county commissioners. And we're starting to try, like, first we wanted to make sure that what we were doing was communicated to and in alignment with the communities, because these are small places. You really don't want to burn bridges. You want to make sure you're being responsible, right? It's like
you really want their blessing.
I mean,
when you start rolling something out.
So you're in Gold Hill, right? Like, it's similar to Stanley. Stanley has 80 people. It's like,
right.
You really can't burn too many bridges, because they're probably mostly related to you,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So in any case, we went about, like, when we were having the conversation within the industry, like here in Idaho, about like how do we operate responsibly? Like, what are our protocols? And then how do we, like, communicate and engage with our community? And then when we got there, like, how do we promote ourselves in this area? Because we need, like, all of these areas need people to come in. So we need to promote ourselves in some way, and we need to give some consumer confidence, some assurance. And so one of the things we did, and I don't know if we can share it here. I shared it way too late, and I apologize, but was we put together a video with all the mayors along, just starting with the Salmon River corridor. We're hoping to expand it out, but we put together a video with all the mayors along the Salmon River corridor, talking about the influence and the importance of happening in their communities, to try to get that message out to sort of consumer bases, to say, like, hey, you're not going to be considered the jerk if you come into our community. We're not going to ostracize you. We're not going to kick you out. We're going to say you're welcome,
Yeah, well, definitely. Those small towns, those small communities definitely have to, they have to have that, they have to roll out that welcome mat. If they feel comfortable with it, then they know that the tourism dollars are very important. We actually are, in the middle of experiencing a bit of a study in the Southern Oregon area, because Shakespeare, which brings
Mm-hmm.
400,000 visitors per summer, is not operating. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they shut down their whole summer season. So I think their first operational performance is going to be like in late September or October. So basically the summer season is non-existent. So now it's kind of like Ashland is trying to, you know, re-identify itself, right? So it's like they need to be, you know, starting to promote other things besides Shakespeare, because Shakespeare used to be the dominator, and then other things were what you did
The
around your
tangential, yeah, the
Shakespeare trip.
tangential things around the Shakes.
Right,
Like while
right.
you're here
But
for
now,
Shakespeare, how about you check out the
Shakespeare's
river?
completely gone.
Yeah, how's that been going?
So, well, you know, I haven't heard much from folks. I mean, a lot of our day trip folks, you know, they're kind of wrestling with a lot of the same things where they're having to do multiple times. So it does open up flexibility, because you used to be taking a customer that was driven by the play timeline, right? It had to be back to town by 6, and so they could go to dinner and then get to their 8 or 8:30 Shakespeare play, right? Well, now, like a lot of the outfitters that we see regularly is one, if they're doing day trips, they're opening up more slots, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're basically, instead of doing 2 trips a day, they're offering like 3 or 4 starts. And just the other day, we were out at Wednesday Nights on the Water, and you know, I mean, it was 6 o'clock, and here comes a commercial trip cruising by. And I was kind of like, that's one of our local outfitters. And it's kind of like, you know, and it's basically because they're limited by how many people they can transport per van,
Mm-hmm.
and how many people they can actually have, you know, in the boat. Where right now, I think that locally they're operating where they're not intermixing groups in the boat. So, you know, it's like a family of 4. That's your boat. There's your guide. That's your deal. A lot of them, if there's not a family of 4 or more, then it's like, you know, if you're just a group of 2, you pay for 3 if you want to go. Kind of, you know, they're trying to work with people like, hey, we'll take you, but we kind of have to at least meet this mark to make sure we put 1 full van on and a guide and all that. But I think that all of those outfitters that are in the day trip stuff, a lot of them do have multi-days as well. So they're trying to kind of cater more to that, you know, trying to get the bigger trip, you know, do the full day versus the half day, you know, so you really only have to, you know, orient people and get them out to the water once, rather than doing
Well,
these,
find
4-hour trips.
and find that balance, right? Like switching in and out between multi-day, like convincing multi-day people who might not otherwise be in a single cohesive group to go on 1 days. And folks in Idaho, and I think it's probably true. I'm on quite a few calls like AO, and I think across the country, but certainly in Idaho, it's true that the norm, I think at this point, is to try to, where possible and to the degree possible, aggregate those cohabitating groups and keep, you know, sort of keep separate where you can, and to, you know, have more trips, have more options. But as you say, like if it's a group of 2 and you need to be able to justify running the trip, like outfitting is not a lucrative business in the first place. So you go for like, hey, I'll take you down if you pay like your 3, you know, which frankly, folks out there is fair. But yeah, no, I think that's pretty common. I guess, you know, one of the things I was wondering, go ahead.
I think that also, you know, outfitters want to keep their guide staff, you know, they want to keep that culture, they want to keep that crew. And so, you know, it's like they're kind of, their top tier is who they're really committing to. And a lot of those guides are guiding down 1 level. So like, you know, if they're a class 4 guide, they're guiding on class 3, so that there's a greater safety barrier there, you know, the more experienced guide. And so like where it's really tough is like, you know, you think of that, the person that basically thought this was going to be their first year guiding. And then, you know, that person is, it's really tough, because that person
tell you what, they are going to be champions. They're going to be champions 3 years in.
Yeah. So there's a lot of challenges there, but
this is a tough first year to get into guiding.
That element. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, they've always said that, you know, outfitting is not for the faint at heart. So, you know, you gotta grow some thick skin right off the get-go.
That's right. It's a labor of love, but it's worth it.
Absolutely. Well, I know we just we're burning up quite a bit of time. Let's talk a little bit about just some of the transportation issues and kind of how that plays in. Like I know here, like we just talked a little bit about, they're trying to not intermingle groups in vans. And I think that's like that transportation is kind of the big thing where I think most folks here in Oregon, I think that they're requiring face coverings when you're in a van, because basically you're all in this closed metal box and you're basically going to drive, whether you're driving 15 minutes or you're driving, an hour and a half. And I know like on the salmon, you've got people that are flying in as well. So like, is that similar program's been adopted for, I know like on the Middle Fork, you can basically have the guests just, shuttle their own vehicle and you don't have to shuttle them in a bus or something. So they probably take advantage of that. But
it's pretty varied. So, and I'd say like, there's no, like back to one of the initial statements, like there's no standard for this. Like there's no industry standard for operating in the context of pandemic diseases. And so like, I just want to give that as a caveat to say that there is no industry standard, like, and whether in Oregon or in Idaho, there's no industry standard. There's no best practice. There are the things we can do to reasonably mitigate to the degree possible. And, you brought up shuttling your own vehicle in the Middle Fork. I know some outfitters are doing that. Aviation companies, much like outfitters, they're certainly in the backcountry here in Idaho in the business of mitigating risk. It's sketchy stuff, but great. But they're doing their own thing. We can't control that. I think most outfitters are in Idaho doing what they can to keep distancing and to keep cohabitating groups distance in transport. It's a tricky area. One thing that we were granted by the governor in Idaho is some leniency in those protocols as an industry. So in the guidance document for outfitting services, we have, 6-foot social distancing where possible. And that's not meant as a cop out. It's purely to say that there are instances in this industry where you cannot be 6 feet away from another person. If I'm pulling you into my boat and you need to be out of a rapid, that's a place where I cannot be 6 feet away from you. It's just not possible. So like there are instances where that's just not possible. Transportation is one where to some degree it's a pickle. And I think part of what outfitters have been doing a really good job about is talking to clients ahead of time and just like really in all areas, like having a conversation about, hey, here's what we're doing. How do you feel about that? Like, here's what we're required to do. Here's what we are doing. Here's where we stand on it. Like, are you comfortable with that protocol? And it seems like that's really been the most effective thing so far, is just being upfront, frank, and honest with people about, go figure. Who knew that could always be a success? But just be really upfront with them about like, hey, here's what we're doing. Are you comfortable with it? If not, like, let's have a different conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this kind of ties into what we started with, is just a screening, in a broader sense, is just like, there's just so much more dialogue that has to happen prior to the trip,
Well, and I think,
you really want them to know what they're getting into and what they're agreeing to.
Yeah. And I think one area where it's difficult to have a dialogue, where I personally think it's going to be most problematic, is at boat ramps. So at high use, multi-use areas. Right. So if I'm going down to like Tuville, or I'm going to like Boundary Creek, and I'm with a bunch of private, commercial, like all sorts of mixed groups, trying to make sure that there is a common expectation and idea of what consideration looks like. That we are like, even if I don't think I need to wear a face mask, it's like that I do so because I'm around other people necessarily there who might feel threatened if I don't. It's like, I think that's going to be one of the key areas that as boaters we need to focus in on and think like, how can we, as a friend of mine puts it, like, how can we not go out of our ways to be an asshole? Like, how can we just show basic consideration to other people at the boat ramp, do the right thing, and like, and distance out where they're really congested places. That's going to be a tricky one.
Yeah. And that's the hardest part of it, right? Is not only are you trying to run your business, but you also have to educate the entire rest of the public.
Yeah.
And it's like, So if you do you make your plan that you feel comfortable with as a business, but then, you got a shop across the way that's just kind of like, this isn't even real.
Totally.
And so
Yeah, totally.
like people walk into your door and they're just like, what do you mean? I'm supposed to wear a mask?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? And
Yeah.
it's just like, it's like you have to educate everybody, because so many people are not, not, as a buddy of mine was saying the other day, we were out on the water. It's like, everybody just needs to be considerate of people's space. Like, what is 6 feet? I mean, we have utility oars we make that are 6 feet. And every time I do a meeting with the factory guys, I bring my 6-foot utility oar and I'm like, this is 6 feet. And then I hold it out, standing up the oar, and the person's like, yeah, you need to be to the back of that oar. That's 6 feet. It's like, it's not that hard to figure out. But yeah,
it's a new way of operating though. And I think to your point, like a lot of outfitters have been, I think one tricky area, and in particular maybe for day trip outfitters, has been like the social politics of being responsible. So like somebody comes into your shop and you're a day trip operator and you have a sign out front that says, if you come in, you must wear a mask, and they're not wearing a mask. And the poor person at the counter says, hey, you got to be wearing a mask. And the person that walks in is like, well, this whole thing is obviously like, the liberal intelligentsia creating a virus or a hoax to like confound us all. And they refuse to do it. And it just turns into this issue that it didn't have to be, and that's even before you get to the river and you're interacting with different groups outside of your place of business where you have authority. So no, I think it's it goes back to like, we're all being asked to be our best selves, or at the very least to not be jerks. And like, I think we can all probably achieve that low bar.
Yeah. And as we've always pretty much said, it's on every one of these things we've done, is that, it's like, be patient and be kind, and, support your local outfitters and support your local shops. But, it's like, we've noticed it just on the supply side of things, is like when it was really happening and everybody was pretty much on lockdown and not everybody was getting out and states weren't opening back up, everybody had a lot of patience, and everybody was like, hey, it's cool. Hey, we're happy that you're operating. We're happy that you can fulfill this order. But now it's just like, where's my stuff? I need it now. I need it now. I need it now. It's like, whoa. We're still in the same stuff here, And it's like, just from a manufacturing standpoint, it's like, just because the demand has increased now and people are actually getting out on the water, we can't just double our production overnight.
Especially last minute, right?
Right. So, so like, I mean, we're actually doing, I think, pretty well, industry considering, but it's one of those things. It's like, people just have to understand that now with, states like, you have Idaho, Montana, Colorado, and Oregon, in need. It's like, all of a sudden, those are like, springtime normally is really busy, early summer really busy, and now it's just exponentially because nobody did anything for 2 months, and now it's like they need everything.
I gotta say, you guys. So Sawyer is easily the most kind provider or manufacturer that I ever dealt with when I needed things. Because even non-COVID times, it's that way. It's like, oh, I don't have any money. I don't have money, or I don't have any need. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, hey Zach, I need 15 oars by next week. It's like, and I know it's unreasonable as I asked for it, but you guys have always been awesome on that way, like understanding the outfitter mindset, which is a tough place to be.
Oh yeah, and it's like, I mean, we definitely sell to a lot of outfitters, and a lot of us came from outfitting. I mean, I have a long history of outfitting. I mean, all of our sales guys are pretty much like in the company with all of our frontline salespeople that are, interacting with the outfitters, is that everybody that is in the sales force used to be outfitters, or at least
get the
spend
struggle.
enough time on
you
the
get
water
the struggle.
That they know
we
what
mean
is.
well. Yeah
Exactly. But and it's also like, I was talking with the folks at Downriver, where it's like, you look at just company identity, where it's like Sawyer has always been known as a company that uses the stuff they make. Like, I mean, our folks that are out there selling it to you actually use what we make. And, and I had this discussion with Downriver, is like, that's kind of how their company came about, is, putting together boats and packages for all these rivers that they have around them. And so, it's like really when I came from outfitting to the sales side of things, it's like, people running a small paddle shop, they're not much different than somebody running an outfitting trip. They're all looking at the same thing, just trying to make sure that they can make enough money to have a nice lifestyle, but they want to do something that they're passionate about, and they're passionate about, running rivers or renting paddle boards or whatever it is. But it's that passion.
Well, and it shows,
drives everything.
and it shows you chose another great example there, like with downriver. It shows in quality of workmanship. Like I wouldn't unless I had no choice, I wouldn't use anything but Sawyer oars, and I love downriver equipment.
Right.
In both cases, it shines through.
Excellent. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of both of us, both companies, I mean, we really have a lot of outfitter base, and so that's a lot of, we definitely get it, and we all love to get out on the river as much as we can. And I mean, I love.
Where are you getting out this summer?
Road.
What's your multi-day plans for the summer? Where are you going?
I'll probably get in just a couple road trips, and I don't know if I'll get out of the state this year, but probably do a Middle Fork trip here in the next couple of years. My kids are like young adults now, and my wife and I did a Middle Fork, and they didn't get to go, and they were kind of like, why weren't we invited?
Well,
and I was kind of like, you were too young,
You haven't done enough for me yet.
Yeah, exactly. And then I want to get back on the Grand, and now the kids are old enough, they want to do a Grand trip, and I keep telling them, well, you got to find that point in your life where you can plug out, take out 3 weeks so you can actually go do it, and we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard to find that time. And a lot of us, in outfitting and the paddle sports, is like a lot of the folks are, having to work extra hard to keep everything going. And, and then you just kind of have to steal away those moments where you can, and, get away for the weekend, and just get on the water as much as you can. And, I think that's what everybody's going to be shooting for. I don't know. I don't know too many companies are going to be taking big 2-week vacations in the middle of this summer.
Yeah. You know what? I'd encourage folks.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that we haven't really talked about.
It's but it is true. Like, listen, like right now, outfitters are working. I can't tell you how hard. It's impossibly hard. I mean, and
Right.
but like to folks out there listening, they are working so hard just to be able to give you the weekend out so that they can survive and be around to give you that experience later. Like, give them a break and go on a trip. Like, get out there, know that they're the most responsible people you're possibly going to deal with in the next year, whether like COVID or otherwise. And
Exactly.
support your local outfitters. They're key to our economies.
Yeah. And that's really the big thing that with this going on is if people are within drivable range of Idaho. If you're a neighboring state to Idaho, or Oregon, is like Colorado, Montana, if you're a neighboring state, this is kind of like outfitting has need. And there's definitely openings, I get the e-blast all the time where, there's definitely, if you want to get together and get out on a river, either being a, 2 or 3 day trip or a 6 or 7 day trip, more than likely there is more availability of that. And really that staycation, stay close to home, close to home can be a neighboring state. Doesn't mean you have to stay
it's the summer.
It's the neighborhood the whole time.
It's the summer of the road trip. Yeah. And
exactly.
Yeah. And people definitely should, it's like, the outfitting industry can make it through this if people help it out. It's a tough industry to begin with. It's low profit margins. It's high overhead. It's really tiring, but outfitters are, they're in it for the same reason that you guys are in your business. It's a labor of love. Like, they do it because they care about it. And if you want to go out to those places, the Middle Fork, to the Rogue, to wherever it might be, and you're here in the Western States, like, I'm gonna say, well, no, I'm gonna say go do it. It's a great time to support things you care about, and support, and so they could be there to give you that experience the next year, so that they'll still be around.
Right. Absolutely. You want to support your local outfitters. if you can get out on a trip and visit a neighboring state, that's an excellent way to try and support the outfitters. And everybody that is in that realm, starts to really understand really kind of what we've been talking about all along, is that shop local, support your local outfitters. Really, those small mom and pop shops need business more than anything else, and just trying to kind of go out of your way to really support local operations, local outfitting, local shops. That's really where we're at. That's a lot of what has become
local
kind of the mantra.
Local culture, local economy. I mean, I think we've
Exactly.
we've realized a different understanding of the word economy maybe in the last 6 months or 3 months. Like we realized oh, it's not just actually what my take home pay is. It's meaning what supports this community.
Right.
It's in rural America, it is largely outdoor recreation these days. We've moved away from extractive economies. We've moved toward these really cool things, and really cool things have come of it. I can go down to Sawyer and get a beer while I look at things that I can't afford and really want, or maybe can't afford sometimes. I actually have a set of Sawyer Horse, folks. They're not unaffordable. But
right.
I can go down and have those experiences insofar as I support that economy. And it's we need to, I don't know, folks across the West need to realize we have something really special going here. We need to support as much as we can. That includes shop local beyond outfitters. But
absolutely. Well, Aaron, I thank you very much. We've definitely covered some ground here, and hopefully we answered a few questions for folks, or maybe got them up off their couch, at least call their buddy and kind of go, hey, have you done a Middle Fork trip yet? And maybe
well, if you haven't lived. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Hey man, I really appreciate it, and thanks for all you guys are doing. And
absolutely.
Hit up IOGA if you have any questions about coming out and get on the Middle Fork. If you're not doing it, you're doing it wrong.
You betcha. Visit IOGA, and if you do anything, be kind, shop local, support local, and get out on the water this summer and help out your local outfitters. Appreciate everybody joining us today. And tomorrow we will actually be having a Friday edition where we'll be giving away the winner of the Yaw movie auction. Will be tomorrow. So that's at 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, 2 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. So definitely check that out tomorrow to see who's walking away with that package. And I think the Yaw the movie is going to be premiering at Whitewater festivals whenever those start back up. So appreciate everybody joining us. Be safe out there and get out on the water. Thank you.